So, welcome to the Spiritual Hour with myself, Graywolf Psychic Medium. Today, we're on episode 11 and we're talking about shadow work and inner child healing. So, shadow work, why is it important? Well, there's a lot of work that we need to do to work on ourselves for all the things that we've repressed or that's been rejected or that's been hidden. This could also be in the back of our minds, not necessarily understanding why we act a certain way and not understanding how to work through it. In short, now, when you think about it, what is your shadow self? So, your shadow self is effectively a persona. So, it's a mask of a version of yourself that we present to the world to be accepted. So, there'll be parts of ourselves that we hide from the world, and only certain people might see some of these other traits because we present ourselves in a certain way, hoping that people or society will accept us. So that's the persona that we're presenting. Okay. Then you've also got the dark shadow. So the dark shadow is more of rage and jealousy, selfishness and greed. These were feelings that we was taught to suppress. So we was taught to suppress these emotions. And then we've got the golden shadow. So what's the golden shadow? So the golden shadow can also hide positive traits like creativity, confidence, or even sensitivity. If you was discouraged or shamed from something in the past. So there's all these different shadows that are being referenced here, but it's about you having awareness of what is going on in here and how do you start to work through that. And again, some of this may connect to your inner child. So this would be the inner child healing, as it's often been known. So what is inner child healing? So inner child healing, again, is connecting with a version of yourself that was learned to hide these traits. So I'll give you an example. So growing up, I could have been quite upset or sad, and I would be told or screamed at or shouted at and told to shut up crying. Okay, so you was then taught that if you was to cry, you would probably get in more trouble or get smacked or something else. So over the years, you start to learn through the behaviors that you're taught that you shouldn't show your emotion in that way. You shouldn't cry. You shouldn't get upset because if you do, then there's more of a consequence for it. So we start to hide these parts of ourselves. Now, as an adult growing up through that, obviously, you come through your childhood and you get to adulthood. And again, I've got a young child with autism. And again, there'll be times that he'll have an outburst and get upset about things that I may not understand. And I'll be like, what's he crying for? Like, I don't understand why he's so upset. And then sometimes my partner might point it out to me and say, well, we can't tell him he shouldn't cry about this or he shouldn't cry about that. It's about him understanding his own emotions. This is how he feels about it. And this is how he's bringing this emotion to the surface, right or wrong. And it's about me or people around you, like yourself, not repressing your own emotions, but also not repressing the emotions of other people around you. And that's just one example of you starting to work on your inner child. There would have been times that you'd have been in your childhood and things would have been going on around you. You'd have seen certain things within your family or your family circle, or even in, relationships. And things happen in those where we pick up sometimes negative traits. And they can be, for example, a dad talking to a mum in a derogatory way, and then the children learning that that's also acceptable. And so we then start having these sort of toxic traits that we've picked up because it become acceptable growing up, for example. And so if one person's doing it, it's almost being passed on. And so then it becomes a trait that you pick up without even realizing what you've picked up. So it's about really connecting to your hidden traits that are kind of, at the back of your mind. You're not really sure sometimes why we act or behave in this way. Sometimes it can be through triggers. Somebody could have said something to you, somebody could have said something about you, and then it's the way that you act or react to that particular situation and how that makes you feel inside. Now, you can feel the emotion from it, that's okay, but it's how you go about it next that tells you where your healing starts to come from. Do you come from a place of thinking, well, I understand that this person said all these things and it's not very nice, but rather than me getting into a toxic exchange with them, I'm just going to send them healing and light, rather than you getting into that toxic exchange? Because personally, you are going to give away your own energy to that person, to that situation. So it's about how you understand how to go about that and to not be triggered by certain people, things that they say. Now, again, whether this is rage or jealousy, this is another, it's a very deep emotion, particularly jealousy. When we get jealous about a situation, whether it be a partner or a parent or anything, that emotion is definitely lower vibration energy. But how we deal with that jealous rage that comes to the surface, but also recognizing it within ourselves and understanding that right now I'm feeling jealous. I'm feeling jealous, but I don't understand why. And then it comes to the surface and we bring it to the surface and we try and work through it. Um, and it is a difficult trait to work with, but it's about working through. Now, usually there's jealousy through some form of insecurity in some way, where someone's felt hard done by, or someone's felt like someone's giving their time or attention to somebody else, whether that's a partner, whether that's a family member. That's where they often come from. And sometimes it's because somebody feels there's an imbalance in a relationship, but not always the case. Sometimes it's only their perception of this situation, how you're looking at the situation through your own lens, not necessarily how the situation is. And how we can feel about that, that can make us feel jealous. So sometimes you've got to ask, which lens are you looking through? Are you looking through the right lens? If you're looking through the right lens, then you might see the situation slightly different to seeing it necessarily in jealousy or rage, or again, sometimes selfishness. There's another trait that they can come up where you kind of make it all about yourself, like me, or I. And so that's another trait where, people kind of feel insecure and sometimes they want to be a center of attention. That could be because when you was younger, you didn't necessarily get the attention that you wanted, because I remember being on that journey myself. I've shared it with you guys on the earlier versions of the podcast, episode 2, where I talk about my childhood trauma and going through quite a difficult period in childhood trauma, feeling unloved, feeling unwanted, being in children's homes, being in foster care. And so we're kind of getting passed from place to place to place and not really understanding where you wanted or loved or needed or appreciated, all of these feelings. And so when I was at school, I was a complete and utter clown. I just did anything that would make people laugh because it got their attention. And in that kind of way, it was kind of almost like, well, he's doing something else that's a little bit stupid, but everyone's laughing. And because I'm making everybody laugh, I'm feeling good. And so it was almost like an attention seeking thing, in a way. And then as I've got older, I've gone quite the opposite. I've gone literally the opposite, where actually being the center of attention sometimes can make me feel very, very awkward. And although I do these things here, remember, this is when we're in the energy of Graywolf, not necessarily Carl. Carl struggles with a lot of things, and I talk about it like we're two different people because, in effect, I feel like that because my daily life, I struggle a lot with crowds and feelings and emotions and things that even I'm still working through after 10 years on this journey, and starting to find acceptance from the situations that I've gone through, and understanding, although I might see it or feel it a certain way, it might not necessarily be the way that I think it is. There could be another version of that, which is the lens that I have to look through to try and find my inner child healing. You know, we don't realize that we grow up with insecurities that are often been built from relationships when we're younger. And as you can imagine from myself, growing up as a child, there would have been abandonment and there would have been a rejection, of course, being in children's homes and foster care. But you don't realize that as you grow up into an adult, that starts to affect your adult relationships too. And you're in relationships and you're almost feeling like, for some reason, that you're going to break up, or they're not going to want you anymore, or they don't love you anymore. And it's almost like an expectation that your bubble's going to burst, because that's how life treated you in the past as a child. And then you can start to feel like a problem it creates in the relationship. It's almost like you need someone to constantly tell you that they love you, they want you, they miss you, they want to be with you all the time. And as much as it's nice to have all of those things in a relationship, it can also be a bit overpowering for the other person in the relationship too, because they didn't tell you that they didn't love you. It's just for some reason that you felt insecure that day, and you felt the need to hear it 2 or 3 times and ask for reassurance because you're not feeling very good that day for whatever reason. So these are inner child healings that we don't realize that we may have picked up along the way that seem to affect our adult relationships from something that's gone on in childhood. If you've had, say, a father left you growing up, or a mother left you growing up, or maybe you went to live with your grandparents, just as an example, you may have that feeling of abandonment. You may have lost someone young, so you may have lost a mother or a father when you was quite young, and although it was something like a passing, it still can feel like grief and abandonment to some people. And so it's about understanding these repressed feelings that we've got within us, and understanding how to work through these feelings, and understanding that, like for myself, I'm not as insecure as I used to be when I was growing up. I would constantly be looking for my cup to be filled from, say, my partner, telling me that everything's okay, and we're in a good relationship and she loves me and things like that. But that was mainly because growing up as a child, you didn't feel safe for whatever reason. And safety for me came in so many different ways. Moving from place to place was one problem. I had, I think, 17 different foster homes. So moving from place to place, you almost feel like you've always got your bag packed, you're always ready to go. And so there's a lot to be said about how we can feel insecure in our adult relationships, even though that adult has done nothing to us, but these feelings that we just don't understand. But they're repressed feelings. They're feelings that we've kept inside, feelings that we're having to work through. And so, in a way, this is again where the sort of shadow work comes from, because you're trying to show the world a side of yourself. This is me, I'm nice and happy, and I'm such a good person. But there'll be other sides of you too that struggle. You might suffer with anxiety, you might suffer with panic attacks, you might suffer with self-worth, self-love. There could be all of these issues. But you only have to look at someone like, say, Robin Williams, the actor. Very, very funny man on the camera, made some brilliant, brilliant films. But behind the scenes, there was clearly a lot of other things that was going on with this man. And obviously, there was things that people didn't know. And so what I'm trying to say is that when we're on the screen or the people that surround us, they only know the version of us that we show to the world. There's other versions that people don't know. And this is that version where we're kind of giving that persona, if you like. Now, one thing I try my hardest to be as authentic as I possibly can when I do readings, classes, podcasts, things like that. Because I don't want to make everyone think that your life's so wonderful when you've gone through all these things. Don't get me wrong, my life's a lot better than it's ever been in the past. But it's called a healing journey. I don't think there's any such thing as fully healed. I feel like it's a journey where we're constantly working towards that goal. But sometimes you can take 10 steps ahead, and all of a sudden, 6 months down the line, something else happens, and all these insecurities creep back in. And then you're asking, what have I got to heal now? I thought I'd done all this. What have I got to heal now? And I realised this as well when my dad passed in November last year. There was a lot of feelings that was going on in my head, like so many feelings. It was such a difficult relationship with him growing up. It was very hard on us. He smacked us a lot, grounded us ridiculously. It was such a hard relationship when I went back to live with my parents. It really, really was. And he wasn't the kind of person that would have told you that he loved you or he missed you or anything like that. So when it came to things like my mum getting ill, then my mum passing, and then my dad calling me and telling me that he'd got cancer, and then all of a sudden, like reality kicking in, like, oh my goodness me, like my dad's ill now. He's going to need some help. He's going to need some support. And whether that was in person or on the phone or any other way, he's going to need some support. And so there's this version of yourself digging deep inside, trying your hardest to be the most kindest and caring, thoughtful person, but you're fighting with a lot of these feelings of feeling rejected or unwanted or unloved. And you're fighting with all these feelings. And I remember going to see my dad for the last time, and I'd gone with my sister. And I understand there's other versions that other people will share in the comments, no doubt. And it was about a week before he passed, and we'd come down. We brought him like loads of food, loads of snacks, loads of drinks, pretty much everything that we could think of, basically. And we got there, and he was just so grumpy, just so grumpy, like. And me and my sister were kind of looking at each other like, we're feeling like little children again. We're feeling like the little children all over again in his presence. Although at the time he's 80, and obviously I'm, 40, 47. But we're feeling like children all over again. But we're trying not to say the wrong thing because we know that he's got cancer. We know that he's not well. And I'd already said to my sister that day, I know this is going to be the last time that we're going to see him properly. And we went outside and we had a little chat outside, and I come back in and I said, look, I know he's like this, but just try to put it aside, try not to react. And I remember coming back and I remember talking to my partner about it and saying to my partner, like, it's just so weird. It was just such a weird visit. Like, I wanted it to be so different. I wanted him to allow me to get in there and to say the things that I wanted to say, but he was so, if you get what I mean. And it was such a difficult energy. It's the only way I can put it. So I had all these feelings swirling around inside, like this could be the last time that I ever get to speak to him or see him. But I almost feel like he doesn't feel happy that we're here when we made this trip. And then I put all it into context that, he's got cancer. He doesn't have very long left. He's clearly suffering. He's clearly struggling. Would you be happy? And so I try and flip it and look through that other lens and try and understand that those feelings or emotions that I was feeling, they could have been, again, those triggers from my past, that inner child healing that I clearly need to do more of. But it brought up a lot of those insecurities or that feeling of a lack of love or a lack of worth. And it brought a lot of feelings back to the surface. And I had to find within myself this acceptance of this was the situation and that was just who he was. Um, other people might have seen a different version of him, always cracking jokes, always messing around. Me and my sister would often get this more serious version of him. Then people would talk about him, go, such a nice fella, he would always be like this. And we'd think, we got a very different version, a very serious side of him. And it made it very difficult. So it brought up a lot of feelings and emotions that I thought that I'd dealt with, but I clearly had to deal with again. And this is where it all came from, this journey actually of the podcast. I remember just sitting just outside there and my head's literally spinning with all these thoughts, all these feelings. And I'm like, I can't deal with this. Like, I literally can't deal with this. And I remember kind of saying, like, what am I meant to do with this? And that's when it came into my head where Spirit said, look, you need to do a podcast. You need to talk about your feelings. There's going to be other people out there that will also be going through something similar or have gone through something similar. It will help other people to also feel like they're not alone. They've gone through or going through something like that. I suppose as well, when we've lost people earlier, so, we could have been young when we lost a mother or a father, and we kind of feel cheated in a way, almost like something's been stolen from us too young, and we understand. Excuse me. We understand it's not their fault, but we almost feel this feeling of abandonment, and it's like we're searching for something that isn't there physically, but spiritually, of course, it's still there. But it's like we still want that physical hug, those physical exchange of those words of I love you. We need that sort of feeling that we're going through. So there may be some repressed feelings that maybe you could be going through, also watching this podcast and understanding that actually there may be a version of you that you show to people, and there may be a version of you that maybe you keep to the other side too. Now, obviously, me growing up, how do I put it? There's a very different version of me today than probably existed of myself 20, 30 years ago. A very different version. My dad was quite a hard man, and he wasn't able to show you feelings. You certainly weren't able to cry. And I remember even getting bullied at school. And I remember my dad, I come in and there was two lads on the front that was trying to beat me up. And I came in and told my dad, and my dad said to me, you either get outside there now and fight both of them, or I'm going to hit you myself. So I'm like, what? So I remember I had to go out on the front, and my dad was watching out the kitchen window, and I had to fight both of them, because it was either fight both of them or my dad was going to hit me, and I wasn't going to take that gamble. That was the way that my dad was. That was the way that he kind of, he's like trying to toughen you up. But we know what the streets are like. Obviously, when they're with the friends, it can be a lot worse. And so it was almost like tough love, but without the word love. You don't see it at the time, of course. You just think, why is my dad not going outside? Why is he not helping me? And so it kind of brings you up to be this tough or tougher character, and someone that had to come through a lot of bullying at the school,
There was obviously abuse at home, which obviously again I'd spoke about in the podcast on episode 2. There was abuse elsewhere too, so there was a lot of it going on. So I had all these difficult feelings that I just didn't know how to manage. And then as I grew up and I got to maybe 14, 15, and I'd grown quite big by then, the only way I knew how to get rid of these emotions then by that age was to fight. And I'd kind of got to an age of 14, 15. I was like, I'm not letting anybody bully me. I'm not anyone talk to me in this horrible way. And it ended up with me just fighting and fighting and fighting. And then you get to a point in your life and you realize that, yes, sometimes you do have to defend yourself, of course. And then there's other times that you realize that you've been brought up a certain way that probably wasn't the way that you want to bring your own children up. Because, of course, my own children, I don't think any of them have ever got into a fight in their lives. And so there's a very big difference from the way that I was brought up to the way that my children are brought up, and how I've got to break those trauma cycles and those cycles of what I was taught and what I teach my children, and how I teach my children to deal with situations that can sometimes be difficult for them, and how I ask them to deal with it rather than the way that I was taught with it too. So there is a lot of work to be done in terms of me having to accept parts of myself that I probably don't like. But I also know that it was part of my journey for me to learn what I've learned today. And again, that would be, so I suppose, part of a persona, in a sense of showing the world one version of you, but there's another version of you that was very different 20 years ago. And there's a version of me that I wouldn't have took any mess in whatsoever, and I would have dealt with it very, very differently. Today, I'm kind of like, you know what? I don't need to give them my time. I don't need to waste my energy. I just need to focus on things or people that make me feel good. People that respect me, people that love me, people that appreciate me. Those people, see you later. I don't need to focus on things like that anymore. I don't need to get angry. I don't need to get irritated about it. No, yes, of course you can. But do I want to waste my energy? Probably not. Is my energy best spent in another way? Probably. Um, and this is the difference between things that you're taught as a child and things that you learn as an adult. You learn through your battles, the rights, your wrongs, and then you kind of go, that probably wasn't the right way to do it. Now I'm going to learn to do it like this. So there is parts of the inner child work where I've got an acceptance of things that I've gone through, and I've got to a point in my life where I say to myself, had I not gone through some of the things that I've gone through, I probably wouldn't be the person I am today. And although the things that I went through was pretty awful, if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't be who I am today. The person that feels like he wants to help people, whether this is on a mental health level, whether this on spiritual readings or development classes, or people just feeling inspired by my podcast or my posts, me passing on knowledge that I've gained along the way to maybe help other people navigate a difficult situation for themselves, because you've got to find some acceptance of what you've gone through. For you to heal that child version of you, you've got to find forgiveness and you've got to find acceptance. Firstly, you've got to ask, who have I got to forgive? Is it yourself? Is it somebody else? Or is it both? And the acceptance of the version of you that the person that you may not like, the person or traits within you, let's say, that you may not like, but something that you can work on. Because once you start to have the awareness of what these uglier traits are, it's about then using that energy to channel it in a different way. sometimes not necessarily reacting when you would react, and taking a moment to just stop and to breathe, to write your feelings down. When you feel like you're going to say something that might be negative, somebody may have upset you or triggered you, and you kind of go to say it, maybe write it down on paper. Maybe you'd write it in a text message, but don't send it. Maybe just leave it on the drafts until 12 hours has passed, till 24 hours has passed, until your emotions have calmed down. Because when your emotions have calmed down, you might look back at that message that you was going to send and go, that was a bit over the top. Like, I really shouldn't have done that. Sometimes it's better just to get them out your head, get them on paper, write them down, write them in the drafts on your text message, but just don't send it. That way you've got the choice to go back, to edit that message before you send it, or to just delete the message. You've got a choice. And your choice is, do I act this way, or do I need to take time first to process these emotions before I act? This is something that you have to understand. Again, you might have been in a situation where, like for myself, my family grew up with pretty much hardly any money. And, going through life, didn't have a great deal of things. And so you kind of grow up in a way of making sure that everything that you own, you try and look after, because you don't know where your next one's going to come from. Your pair of trainers when you was a kid, or your pair of trousers, or your coat, whatever it may be. And it teaches you certain things through life of sometimes not having it. Sometimes you start to appreciate these things when you've not had them. And sometimes you can take that too far too. And we can then become more sometimes selfish, because we're almost focused on survival mode for ourselves. And I understand that too. I've had to be in survival mode. I've had to move from place to place. Um, I've had some ridiculous parts in my life where I've suffered homelessness, and I've lived in hostels and gone places like that. So there's been some difficult situations that I've gone through, that I've navigated in life. And sometimes I've made some good choices, and sometimes I've made some not so good choices. But I think that's the beauty of age and wisdom. The older you get, the more wiser you get, because the mistakes that you've made, you learn not to make them again. And then it's about you sharing that knowledge and wisdom with other people so they don't pass that on too. For my own self, I was very conscious of trying my hardest to not let my own traumas affect my children. That was massive for me. And for me to make sure that my triggers didn't affect my children. Now, for the first few years, it did, particularly my first son. It definitely did. I was in a difficult part there, particularly as I've grown. Particularly over the last 10 years, I've managed to become a better version of myself and not allow my triggers necessarily to affect my other children, and to not necessarily act or react on something that's triggered me, and try to take myself away from something before I feel that emotion kick in, whether that be rage or sadness or despair, whatever it may be, and manage to just take a deep breath, take myself away, and just try to find some calmness in my mind. Because through trauma, the smallest little thing can trigger you, particularly through PTSD. Whether it be a smell of a hand wash, that would do it for me. Watching a certain program on the TV would trigger me as well. Certain music or songs would trigger me as well. Going through certain areas of my sitter could trigger me too. And so I've got to a point now where I'm better with those. It's still there. It's still there. It's kind of like, I hate this song. But I don't get to a point where I'm like, I feel rage. I've got to a point where I just kind of go, turn it off. I don't want to hear it. I don't feel the rage, like my body would tense up inside, my stomach, my muscles, and like, I don't feel it like that, although I used to. It would lead to intense flashbacks, which then would affect the muscles in the body, my shoulders, my back, my stomach, and it was almost like you tensed up on a weights machine. That's the only way that I could describe it to you. And then you kind of go through life, after particularly going through the trauma, trying to hide your emotions from other people. It took me years before I was able to talk about it. And it took me years before I was able to share with an audience as well what I'd gone through. And so you get to a point where you kind of feel like, you know what, I don't have to feel the emotion of shame. I don't have to feel that. Although, yes, I am a victim, I don't have to feel like a victim. And again, it's something that I have to remind myself whenever I feel those emotions kick in. I'm like, Carl, although you are a victim, you don't have to feel like it. Just remind yourself, you're not there right now. That was many, many years ago. You're a grown man. You're safe. And at that particular point, I have to sort of visualize the child version of myself and, visualize giving him a hug, visualize telling him the words that he needed to hear at the time, telling him that he's safe, telling him that he's loved, telling him that he's wanted, telling him that he's appreciated and that he's valued. And I have to hug him in my mind. And, for those of you right now that's here, you can do the same thing. You can just create a space in your mind that feels like a safe space. So, you could just visualize this place that feels like your safe space. And then you could just bring yourself into this image. And then you could bring the child version of yourself into the same image. And as you bring the child version of yourself standing next to yourself, you just need to embrace them. Put your arms out and embrace them and tell them what it is that they need to hear within you. What is it that you needed to hear when you was younger? Whether you wanted to feel loved or safe, whatever that was, you need to take a minute or two or three and imagine hugging that version of yourself and telling yourself everything that you needed to hear at that particular time. It may be emotional for you, so take a moment, but it may feel emotional as you visualize that energy. And if that happens, that's okay too. But sometimes we have to remind that the child version of ourselves sometimes creeps to the surface. And after going through 6 years of counseling myself, what I was very, very aware of is the child version of me was constantly trying to get out. It was his emotions that was trying to get out because the man, these things hadn't happened to, of course. But the boy, all these things had happened to him. So the boy was trying to get out, and all these emotions that was trapped was coming out through certain behaviors, traits, words, emotions. And I realized it wasn't the man that I necessarily had to heal first. It was the child within me that I had to heal first. So going through the counseling, there was a lot of work that we did through working on the childhood and understanding the childhood and understanding where things could have been different and learning to look at things through different lenses. So you start to understand, although the man is what I present to you, the child version was the one that was trying to come through my feelings and my emotions. And yes, it's okay for men to cry. It's completely okay for men to cry, and it's something that I have done a million times over um, through my times and through my breakdowns. And so, what I would say to you that for anyone that is wanting to work with themselves on their inner child, this is where it starts. But I would highly, highly recommend that you also find someone like a counselor or a therapist, depends where you're from, to help you work through this. It's not something that I recommend um, doing just on your own. Um, when you work through these feelings, what we often do is we push all these thoughts and feelings to the back of our head and go, not today, not today. And we get through life and we get to the age of 40, 45, 50, and, we keep going, not today, not today. And then one day, bang, today's the day. And it's like you've got to deal with those feelings because you've kind of pushed them to the back of your mind for all those years and you hadn't dealt with them. Everything just got on top of each other, and one thing after another just got on top. And that's when you have to understand that you start dealing it. So I definitely recommend it's something that you do with a professional to help you work through it, because from my own experience of working through it, it was raw. It was essential, but it was raw. And at first, I remember coming away feeling more upset than I did when I went in the door. And that's generally because you work for an hour through the counselling session, and then they go, time's up. And you've opened yourself up, you're kind of feeling all these emotions, and then they're going, right, hour's up, you're going to have to go. You're like, whoa, I wasn't ready for that. And so for me, I walked away for the first few weeks so angry. I really did. But over time, it came down bit by bit by bit. And I managed to work through um, these emotions and not necessarily acting on these emotions, because at that particular time, it was hard in here. Um, me not wanting to talk about certain things or deal with certain things, or better still, not knowing how to deal with them. And I used to live week by week, like, I need to see my counsellor, I can't wait to see them on Monday. And I used to go every Monday, I think it was 7 o'clock. And I used to literally kind of live week by week, like almost like I felt that they was going to rescue me. And in a way, it is, but actually, it's actually you that rescues yourself, because they mostly listen and offer direction. But say there's an hour of talking, you're probably going to do 45 minutes of it, and they're probably going to do 15 minutes of it, and just help you look at things in a different way and steer you down a certain path. So it's actually, although yes, they do help massively without a shadow of a doubt, you do a lot of the work yourself, but you do need a medical professional to help you steer through that. Again, things that you've not worked through, things that you've pushed to the back of your mind. You keep telling yourself that you're okay, but for some reason, you're still being triggered in your adult life. And things that maybe only your partner knows or one or two people know. And you kind of get through life on what I call survival mode. Because we call ourselves survivors, of course, because again, what we had to go through and what we survived. And you literally go through on survivor mode. So, what you've got to ask yourself, do you want to be going through on survivor mode, or do you want to somehow work through those pains and discomfort and come to a place where there's some form of release and peace in some way? And that's why, again, sometimes writing things down can be really helpful. That's why understanding the emotions that you're feeling can be very helpful, and awareness of them, an awareness of, right now I'm feeling jealous, right now I'm feeling rage, yeah, right now I'm feeling sad, and understanding what each of these emotions, and then asking yourself why. And when you ask yourself why, is it because of something that's happened, something that you thought about? What's connected to this? And this is where you start to work through all of this inner child healing and the shadow work, because again, the version of you that you present, or the version of you that lives a day-to-day life doing something else. For myself personally, I used to look forward to the weekends massively when I was growing. So before I started my healing work, I used to play football, I used to play rugby. I really look forward to that weekend. I was quite an aggressive football player, and the same with rugby. And I look forward to channeling all that energy every weekend. Every single weekend, I look forward to channeling all that energy. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't getting into fights, but I played hard. And for me, it was a way for me to channel my energy in a positive way. And so I used to look forward to the weekends of, you know, seeing somebody else on the pitch and having a good battle with them, and me doing this in a physical way that wasn't something that was going to get you into trouble, but I would enjoy that. I would really enjoy that. And then I got to the age of 30, and I had awful back issues where I just couldn't walk for like 2 years. Trapped spinal cord, dislocated pelvis, slip discs. So there was like 2 years I couldn't walk. That was the end of my football. Football was something that I used as a positive channel throughout my childhood. Wherever I went, there was a football under my arm. And when I got to the age of 30, and that was it, I was done with football just because I couldn't take any more risks. It took me till I was like 32 to get back to just walking again. And I wasn't prepared to take the risk of playing football anymore. But then one of my coping mechanisms had gone. What was I going to do? How was I going to cope? Because that was something that I coped with as a child. It was a child coping mechanism. I had to learn something else as an adult too. It was always a way of me focus on the football, enjoy the football, forget about all that other crap in your head. Let's just focus on the good stuff. And it was a way of me coping, or not coping, as the case may be. And so I had to get to a point where I had to break down. Essentially, I had to get to the point where, as I said earlier, everything stacked on top of each other. You pushed it to the back of your mind and kept saying, not today, not today, not today. And it was all stuck at the back of your mind. And that was the point where the stack got so high, it overflowed. And that's when the breakdown came. And then I had no choice really to start the healing work, because it was, it was pretty much, it was either that or something worse, of course. And I wasn't going down that road. So it's really important that you start doing the works on yourself, understanding the traits that you've got as an adult. Are they from your childhood? Are they from some form of trauma that you've gone through? Coping. The way that you cope, the way that you go inward. Like for me, I don't trust many people. For being in the situations I've been in as a child, always being told that, you're not going to have to move here. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you've got a new mum. Don't worry, we won't ever let you go. You'll always stay here. Then you've got another new mum. You kind of have almost abandonment trust issues with people. And, people not keeping to the things that they've said. And so then you can then almost not trust someone's word because 5 other people have let you down. So because 5 other people have let you down, you assume that the next 50 people are going to let you down because these 5 have. And I understand. And then you get to a point in your life where I've met a lot of people on my spiritual journey that will say, Carl, I'm going to help you with this. Carl, I'm going to help you with that. And I remember at first getting like a bit carried away with it, like, oh my God, they're going to help me with this, they're going to help me with that. And then you realize that they're just words. And people sometimes just say what they think you want to hear. And then I got to a point on this journey where I realized that sometimes people just say things because that might be their intention for whatever reason. But I've got to a point now where I'm like, you know what? People say a lot of things, but they're just words. Actions speak louder than words. Words are just said. Actions actually mean that they're doing it. And so I kind of get to that point in my journey now where I kind of go, you know what? A lot of people say a lot of things, and their intentions are that they're going to help you and do this and that. But I kind of go in this ear and out that ear. And I kind of think to myself, well, until they actually do it, it's just words. And rather than me hold on to that, because again, that's a bit of a trigger, I suppose, being let down through your life constantly, you know, through your parents or your foster parents, and always being let down, and kind of feeling a little bit resentful of these people, feeling a little bit resentful that they said they'd help me with this and they said they'd help me with that, and like, ugh. I'm feeling a bit resentful. So again, recognizing that energy, and then I got to the point where I'm like, whatever. If they're going to help, great, and if they're not, that's absolutely fine. In one ear, out the other, quite simply because I was trying to learn to not hold on, and feel that sort of resentfulness and the feeling of almost like if they help me, it's a good thing, and if they don't help, it's not meant to be. That their words of intentions was obviously of good intentions, potentially. Sometimes it might be what you wanted to hear, whichever way round. But rather than me hold on to that, I recognize that that didn't help. So the best thing I can do is just let go of it and just kind of go, you know what, if it's meant to be, it will find its way. And try not to hold on to it and let go of those triggers, because even the smallest little thing like that can trigger you. Because if you've been let down all your life and then somebody else lets you down, there's one too. And that's just the smallest example without even going under the surface of how one thing can make you feel an emotion that's sometimes ugly, like resentment. So it really is about you starting to work through your child healing, understanding your shadow work, understanding which version that you're showing and which version that you're not. Which version that it's almost like you hiding in the darkness, effectively, um, until this other newborn version comes out. Because the version of me today is a lot nicer than the version of myself when I was 30. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a bad guy, nothing like that. But I was more of a person that I dealt with things differently. And because I dealt with things differently, um, I think I look at myself now and kind of go, you know what? I don't let those things get to me anymore like I used to. I can walk away. I don't have to sort of dwell on those energies and let them wind me up or even make me feel like I want to, you know, get into a conflict of any kind, mentally or physically. I kind of got to that point in my life now where I'm able just to walk away and to not get into a situation, because again, even with your ego, there was a gentleman that I was at the school. It was probably a couple of years ago, and I just pulled in near the school, and I had bags of time. It's a 20 mile an hour zone, so I had bags of time. And this gentleman, um, he was coming on a motorbike, but he was way, 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 way behind. And all of a sudden, I pulled and then pulled back in. And he came up to my window, kind of effing and blinding at me, like giving me all this abuse at the window. And I'm sitting there and he's going, all these things he's saying to me. I'm like, hold on a minute, you've been doing 50 mile an hour and 20 mile an hour zone, and you're having a go at me because you think that I've pulled out on you. Now, the old version of me would have definitely stepped out that car, 100%. there would have been no doubt in my mind. I'd have got out that car and would have dealt with it at the side. But I got in the car. I think my partner was there. I'm not sure if I'd got my son then or was about to get my son. There's no part of my partner that would ever want to see anything like that, me getting involved in anything like that, nor would my son. And so the ego inside is saying, you know what you need to do here, Carl? And then the other side of me saying, nah, walk away. It's not worth it. Let him have his win. Let him have his win. It's just words. Let him have his win. And the ego inside's telling you, oh, don't let him talk to you like that, Carl. And I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, you know what? Just not worth it. And it was a win for me, really, because although he walked away thinking that he'd won, I actually walked away, although I didn't like the words that he said, I also walked away with a win too, because it didn't escalate into something else, which it could have done. And this is outside of school, and it could have escalated. So wins come in different ways, but it depends how you look at them. You can look at them from one way and go, nah, I could have done this. That's a win. Or you can walk away and take your dignity away with you. And yeah, you're a bit of a dented ego, but kind of go, you know what? I got the win there because I didn't act like that. So again, working through my triggers, working through the shadow version of myself, and understanding the awareness of my triggers, the awareness of the emotion. What is the emotion that I'm feeling? Why am I feeling this emotion? And once I understand what the emotion is, you know, rage, hurt, despair, ego, whatever it might be, once I understand that, I can then make an educated decision on what I feel that it is I should do. I've learned to not act on impulse. I've learned to, in the past, I was very impulsive and I'd have acted straight away. But I've learned now not to act on impulse. Take some time. Take some time and just sit with that emotion and allow the emotion to settle before I react. And again, that can be with any situation, not just the one I spoke about there, but with any situation. Do you want to send that message, or do you want to keep it in your drafts like we spoke about earlier? Again, when you look back at your drafts 12 hours later or 24 hours later, you might want to edit that message. You might want to say it in a little bit of a different way. You might want things just to calm down. Sometimes some battles can't be won. And I'm not saying that don't say what's on your mind, but sometimes when we're angry, we say other things as well. And that's where I say, take time, allow the emotion just to settle, and then think about how you're going to react, respond, or even not respond if that's the case as well. So, guys, I hope that you've all enjoyed today's podcast. I'm Graywolf Psychic Medium. You've been listening to The Spiritual Hour, and I'll see you all again next week. Until then, guys, take care and let me know in the comments if this episode resonated with you.